Okay, I'm going to talk about the death or slash murder of Dionysus-Osiris, and I'm going to refer to the writing of Plutarch, his Moralia, Volume 5, and he has a section on Isis and Osiris. That's what it's called. And he gives a little more detail. I've given you quite a bit of it out of Diodorus Siculus' work and Nonus' work, but we get a little bit more information from Plutarch as well. And that information is how he was murdered, and that Set is also known as Typhon, and he had red hair. So I'm going to read a little bit here, and we're going to talk about how Dionysus-Osiris was tricked into sitting into a box that was ornate at a dinner, and when he got in it, they sealed it up with molten lead and then threw it in the water. And his wife had to go find him. Obviously, he probably suffocated in the box. And she found the coffin in Byblos and retrieved the body and then buried it. But then Typhon Set, who, as you know from my work, is also Prometheus, found it and chopped it up. Now, with these mythologies, they like to tie in the story with either the planetary motion or the star motion or the seasons. And so they tie the murder of Osiris Dionysus into the movements and cycles of the moon. And it's interesting, too, that they talk about the pig being unclean because it's, and I'm going to read this, in like manner, they hold the pig to be an unclean animal because it is reputed to be most inclined to mate in the waning of the moon, and because the bodies of those who drink its milk break out with leprosy and scabrous itching. The story which they relate at their only sacrifice and eating of a pig at the time of the full moon, how Typhon, while he was pursuing a boar, by the light of the full moon, found the wooden coffin in which lay the body of Osiris, which he rent to pieces and scattered. They do not all accept, believing it to be a misrepresentation, even as many other things are. Okay, I'm going to stop. So as I've told you, there's always some variation in the myths, but there should be enough in these books that I've been talking about for you to put the picture together. And in Plutarch's Isis and Osiris, he even touches on how they're trying to figure out which god was what in ancient Egypt. At one point, they were comparing Athena to Isis. Well, it's not. Athena is probably more like Bast would be her, that goddess. Now, I'm sorry, let me back that up. No, yeah, I would. And then Sekhmet would be more Artemis. But they even talked about Ammon being assigned to Zeus. Okay, what I find interesting is just some of the detail. Let me read a little bit more here. For my part, I think also that naming unity Apollo, duality Artemis, and Hebdomad Athena, and the first cube Poseidon bears a resemblance to the statues and even to the sculptures and paintings with which their shrines are embellished. For their king and lord Osiris they portray by means of an eye and a scepter. There are even some who explain the meaning of the name as many-eyed on the theory that Os in the Egyptian language means many and Iri eye. And the heavens, since they are ageless because of their eternity, they portray by a heart with a censer beneath. Okay, I'm going to stop. So they're talking about the one eye symbol represents Osiris. And I've shown you in some of the ancient art some of the pictures of Jesus Christ with that one eye in the triangle, that eye of providence. So it's a pharaonic line. And it could also go back to Zeus, who's Odin with the one eye. Now, it's also confirmed in Plutarch that Osiris is Dionysus. And I'm going to read a little bit more here. It says, one of the first acts related of Osiris in his reign was to deliver the Egyptians from their destitute and brutish manner of living. This he did by showing them the fruits of cultivation, by giving them laws, and by teaching them to honor the gods. Later, he traveled over the whole earth, civilizing it without the slightest need of arms, but most of the peoples he won over to his way by the charm of his persuasive discourse combined with song and all manner of music. Hence the Greeks came to identify him with Dionysus. During his absence, the tradition is that Typhon attempted nothing revolutionary because Isis, who was in control, was vigilant and alert. But when he returned home, Typhon contrived a treacherous plot against him and formed a group of conspirators, 72 in number. He also had the cooperation of a queen from Ethiopia, who was there at the time and whose name they report as Aso. Typhon, having secretly measured Osiris's body and having made ready a beautiful chest of corresponding size, artistically ornamented, caused it to be brought into the room where the festivity was in progress. The company was much pleased at the sight of it and admired it greatly, whereupon Typhon jestingly promised to present it to the man who should find the chest to be exactly his length when he lay down in it. They all tried it in turn, but no one fitted in it. Then Osiris got into it and lay down. And those who were in the plot ran to it and slammed down the lid, which they fastened by nails from the outside and also by using molten lead. Then they carried the chest to the river and sent it on its way to the sea through the Tennetic mouth. Wherefore the Egyptians, even to this day, name the mouth the hateful and execrable. Such is the tradition. They say also that the date of which this deed was done was the 17th day of Athyr, when the sun passes through Scorpion, and in the 28th year of the reign of Osiris. But some say that these are the years of his life and not of his reign. The first to learn of this deed and to bring to men's knowledge an account of what had been done were the Pans and Satyrs, who lived in the region around Chemis, and so, even to this day, the sudden confusion and consternation of a crowd is called a panic. Isis, when the tidings reached her, at once cut off one of her tresses and put on a garment of mourning in a place where the city still bears the name of Copto. Others think that the name means deprivation, for they also expressed deprived by means of Copton. But Isis wandered everywhere at her wits' end. No one whom she approached did she fail to address, and even when she met some little children, she asked them about the chest. As it happened, they had seen it, and they told her the mouth of the river through which the friends of Typhon had launched the coffin into the sea. Wherefore the Egyptians think that the little children possess the power of prophecy, and they try to divine the future from the portents which they find in children's words, especially when children are playing about in holy places and crying out whatever chances to come into their minds. Okay, I'm going to stop for a minute. So it continues on, and she ends up finding it in Byblos, which is ancient Phoenicia, up there, around Israel, probably north of it, more Syria. But she finds it, she gets the chest, she retrieves it. It was a king that had taken it and used it to support the roof of his house as a pillar. So that's interesting as well. And she takes it back and she buries it. Now, in this Plutarch, it talks about Horus was already born, and I got to find the passage, but she ends up giving it to him. And then Horus goes to war with Typhon Set. So I'm going to hang on a sec. Okay, so basically then she reburies it and Typhon finds it. I'll just read a little more. But Typhon, who was hunting by night in the light of the moon, happened upon it. Recognizing the body, he divided it into 14 parts and scattered them, each in a different place. Isis learned of this and sought for them again, sailing through the swamps in a boat of papyrus. This is the reason why people sailing in such boats are not harmed by the crocodiles, since these creatures in their own way show either their fear or their reverence for the goddess. The traditional result of Osiris's dismemberment is that there are many so-called tombs of Osiris in Egypt, for Isis held a funeral for each part when she had found it. Others deny this and assert that she caused effigies of him to be made and that these she distributed among the several cities, pretending that she was giving them his body in order that he might receive divine honors in a greater number of cities, and also that if Typhon should succeed in overpowering Horus, he might despair of ever finding the true tomb when so many were pointed out to him, all of them called the tomb of Osiris. All right, I'm going to stop. Oh, one more thing here. Let me continue reading. Of the parts of Osiris's body, the only one which Isis did not find was the male member. For the reason that this had been at once tossed in the river, and that had been and the Lepidotus, the sea bream, and the pike had fed upon it, and it is from these very fishes the Egyptians are most scrupulous in abstaining. But Isis made a replica of the member to take its place, and consecrated the phallus in honor of which the Egyptians, even at the present day, celebrate a festival. Later, as they relate, Osiris came to Horus from the other world and exercised and trained him for the battle. After a time, Osiris asked Horus what he held to be the most noble of all things. When Horus replied, to avenge one's father and mother for evil done to them, Osiris then asked him what animal he considered the most useful for them who go forth to battle. And when Horus said a horse, Osiris was surprised and raised the question why it was that he had not rather said a lion but than a horse. Horus answered that a lion was a useful thing for a man in need of assistance, but that a horse served best for cutting off the flight of an enemy and annihilating him. All right, I'm going to stop. Okay, the 14-day thing is associated with the cycles of the moon. Like I said, I'm sure it happened. I'm sure he chopped up the body, but they tend to modify the story to tie it in with the planetary or seasonal cycle, so it's remembered easy. The month would have been November, the time of Scorpion, and as I just said, she created multiple tombs of Osiris, so you'll probably never find the real tomb of Osiris throughout Egypt. So now I'm going to read a little bit more. Typhon formally accused Horus of being an illegitimate child, but with the help of Hermes to plead his cause, it was decided by the gods that he also was legitimate. Typhon was then overcome in 2 other battles. Osiris consorted with Isis after his death, and she became the mother of Harpocrates, untimely born and weak in his lower limbs. Okay, I'm not really sure what that's all about, but some other type of child or symbol. And Plutarch goes on that they associated the Apis bull with Osiris, and it's usually black. The bull is black because it's associated with the dark water. Now, they'll either show Osiris as a flesh-colored, or he'll be blue, or he'll be green because of the vegetation or the sky, or he'll be black because of the water. But Typhon is always shown as red because of his skin color, had a reddish tone to it, and his hair was red. And I'm going to read a little bit more. It says, the Egyptians, in fact, have a tradition that Hermes had thin arms and big elbows, that Typhon was red in complexion, Horus white, and Osiris dark, as if that had been in their nature but mortal men. Moreover, they give to Osiris the title of general and the title of pilot to Canopus, from whom they say that the star derives its name, also that the vessel which the Greeks call Argo, in form like the ship of Osiris, has been set among the constellations in his honor, and its course lies not far from that of Orion and the dog star, of those that the Egyptians believe that one is sacred to Horus and the other to Isis. Okay. Now Plutarch also says that Serapis is also Osiris. That's another name. As I've told you through my mythological unification theory, that these gods, ancient people traveled all over and have a different name in every mythology. And I already read to you that it said specifically in Plutarch's writing that he traveled the whole world and spread his cults of agriculture. Now let me read this part about the red hair. Now Osiris and Isis changed from good minor deities into gods, but the power of Typhon weakened and crushed, but still fighting and struggling against extinction. They try to console and mollify by certain sacrifices, but again there are times when at certain festivals they humiliate and insult him, by assailing red-headed men with jeering, and by throwing an ass over the edge of a precipice, as the people of Copto do, because Typhon had red hair, and in color resembled an ass. Okay, I'm going to stop. So he was a white man of fair complexion. That's why he'd have that reddish tone to it, and he had red hair. Now let me read a little bit more. Osiris, on the other hand, according to their legendary tradition, was dark because water darkens everything. Earth encloses and clouds when it comes into contact with them. In young people, the presence of moisture renders their hair black, while grayness, like a paleness as it were, is induced by dryness in those who are passing their prime. Okay, I'm going to stop. So they're talking about his hair color. And that's the thing with Osiris, Dionysus, is you'll see him oftentimes shown with the dark hair. But then I showed you with the Dionysica, he's got a reddish blonde hair, but blue eyes. So I'm not quite sure if he had darker hair. It probably was, or if it was an auburn. It's hard to say, but they associate him with black hair. Now, and he's associated with the water and the harvest. Okay, so reading a little bit more, they talk about the dog star is the star of Isis, the bringer of water. And basically, what had happened that got Typhon so angry was that his wife Nephthys, she was barren and she couldn't get a baby from Typhon, so she disguised herself as Isis and got impregnated by Osiris, Dionysus, and that's what angered Typhon Set. I'll just read this real quick. Nephthys, after her marriage to Typhon, was at first barren. If they say this not about a woman, but about the goddess, they must mean by it the utter barrenness and unproductivity of the earth resulting from a hard-baked soil. Like I said, they always associate it with the seasons or the earth or the stars. Again, the death of Osiris, it reads, quote, the Egyptians have a legend that at the end of Osiris's life came on the 17th of the month, of which the day it is quite evident to the eye that the period of the full moon is over. Because of this, Pythagoreans call this day the barrier, and utterly abominate this number. For the number 17 comes in between the square 16 and the oblong rectangle 18, which, as it happens, are the only plane figures that have their perimeters equal to their areas, bars them off from each other and disjoins them, and breaks up the ratio of 8 to 8 and an eighth by its division into unequal intervals. Some say that the years of Osiris's life, others that the years of his reign were 28, for that is the number of the moon's illumination. And in that number of days does she complete her cycle. The wood, which they cut on the occasions called the burials of Osiris, they fashion into a crescent-shaped coffer, because of the fact that the moon, when it comes near the sun, becomes a crescent-shaped and disappears from our sight. Okay, I'm going to stop. So, here again is that sacred geometry. And, and again, another passage says, then again they depict Osiris by means of an eye and a scepter, the one of which indicates forethought and the other power, much as Homer, in calling the Lord and King of all, Zeus, supreme and counselor, appears by supreme to signify his prowess, and by counselor his careful planning and thoughtfulness. All right, I'm going to stop. So this guy was murdered, and his wife found his body, and it was chopped up again, but then she reburied it in different places. And they associate his murder and death with the moon cycles and the water, and they associate him with the dark water for his hair color, and Set with the red hair and red skin. Now that's Satan, who's always shown with the red skin. I've already told you that Prometheus is Set, is Egyptian, Typhon is Loki, is many other different names, trickster. And he's the one who plotted this out. So so we get a little bit more here. And also, sadly, they would go after the red-haired men in Egypt. They wouldn't, let them be because of the red hair. So unfortunately, the red-haired guys were getting it because of this ancient crime. So that was from Plutarch's Moralia, Volume 5, Isis and Osiris. And we definitely get a little bit more detail on these ancient people, these ancient Phoenicians, Cretans, who spread out all over the world and set up kingdoms and queendoms, and all religion, all mythology, all of your occult is based on these people and other people associated with them during that time, or a little bit before or a little bit after. So that's it on the murder of Dionysus-Osiris. One more thing I wanted to mention was that Horus did capture Typhon Set, and when he did, he presented him to Isis, but Isis wouldn't kill him. She couldn't bring herself to do that, and so Horus was angry, and he ripped off her crown. He did not decapitate her, as some mythologies state. And also, just one last thing, they were familiar with magnetic property of iron and lodestone. I'm going to read this real quick because they say Dionysus-Osiris discovered that property. So it says, moreover, they called the lodestone the bone of Horus, and iron the bone of Typhon, as Manetho records. For as the iron oftentimes acts as if it were being attracted and drawn towards the stone, and oftentimes is rejected and repelled in the opposite direction. In the same manner, or in the same way, the salutary and good and rational movement of the world at one time by persuasion attracts and draws towards itself and renders more gentle than harsh and Typhonian movement, and then again it gathers itself together and reverses it and plunges it into difficulties. So, quite a bit of information in this Plutarch. Thank you.